Hello, my name is Nigel Griffiths. I work in the Advanced Technology Centre in the UK, part of IBM Europe. This movie is about the hardware management console and one particular feature that's just available in May 2009. The graphical user interface has been enhanced so that we can directly access VIOS server commands. In this May announcement we have three new features that affect the hardware management console, in particular the active memory sharing, AMS, and that's covered in other movies. There's also a memory upgrade available for a HMC. I think the default is 1 GB and you can increase that to 2 or 4 GB. This is particularly useful if you're using DirectX. When DirectX contacts a HMC to extract information out of it, it uses the common object model, and this can eat up the memory inside a HMC, so it's probably worth upgrading if you're using DirectX. But this movie is concentrating on these VIOS server commands that we can now run directly from the HMC. I went looking for the announcements and I had one line that said that there were some enhancements, and I actually found this in the announcement. Now, quite why you'd want to write 3 or 4 paragraphs of information about a graphical user interface escapes me, so I cut this down into a summary here. We can create the logical partition as normal, as we've been doing for the past 9 years. But now we can, when we create a virtual disk, we can do that on the HMC directly. We can create a storage pool, then a logical volume, and connect that to a logical partition. Or we can do the similar thing with a whole disk or a LUN, connecting that to a logical partition, and also NPIV devices. We're not going to cover that in this movie. We're going to create a different movie for NPIV. On the virtual Ethernet, we can create the C, the shared Ethernet adapter, from the HMC. It'll allow us to set up dual VIO servers with virtual Ethernet failover, and it will let us configure virtual Ethernet switches directly from the HMC. On the optical devices, we can both move a physical CD or DVD to a particular logical partition, or we can create a media library, which is a file system of ISO images of what would be on a CD or a DVD, and we can connect these images via the virtual optical device to a logical partition. I actually use that one quite a lot, as I get ISO images and I can then boot AIX or Linux from an image without actually having to go to the machine and input a DVD. Before we try this, we need to be up to the software that came out in May 2009. So we need HMC 734 and Service Pack 2. If you go to the update screen on your HMC, you'll find the details like this. Your VIO server has to be updated because it's now going to take commands from the HMC, and again it's the level that came out in May 2009, so it is 2.1.1 with the fix pack. I found it didn't work without the fix pack that came out in May. Now the firmware, I'm not really sure. I'm actually using the latest level. Provided you got the HMC and the VIO server up to these levels, I think it will work. Just for your reference, I'm again using the version that came out in May 2009. And all of this software is available from IBM Fix Central. And I've put the URL there just to save you time if you've forgotten. But that's enough talk. Let's now go and look at what it looks like on the screen and go and use it. Okay, here's our HMC. We were looking at our list of servers. We're going to be using this server at the top here, bronze, and I've installed the latest VIO server here. That's the only thing I've actually got running at the moment. In fact, the only things I've done on this machine is accept the license. I put a password on padmin. I put the VIO server on the network, and I've added a few virtual resources to the VIO server. So let's have a quick look at that now. Configuration, manage profiles. I only have the one profile, so we'll select that and take actions. Edit. So in the virtual adapters I've added a few things. So I had the 2 serial resources at the bottom anyway. I've added the Ethernet, the virtual Ethernet adapter 11, and then I've added 2 virtual SCSI adapters 12 and 13. For virtual SCSI 12, I've said that it will be connected to the logical partition that's number 2. There isn't one at the moment, so it just tells us the number here, and it will be connecting as adapter 3. Just as a convention on all my clients, 0 and 1 are the 2 serial adapters. The first Ethernet will be the second adapter, and so the SCSI adapter will be number 3. For my Virtual SCSI 13, I've left it as any partition, and we'll see that the difference between those two setups when we get to creating a couple of logical partitions. Otherwise, this is standard default setup for everything. And we'll come out of that, and we'll go and create a logical partition. But before we do that, we'll have a look at these new panels available. Go to Configuration, we fly down here to Virtual Resources. Here's the Shared Processor Pool Management. We've had a while. This is the new Shared Memory Pool Management, and we have the two that we're looking at today, the Virtual Network Management and Virtual Storage. Let's go into the Virtual Network Management to start with. We'll first see that we have virtual switch support in here. So recently we've been able to have not just one virtual switch inside the machine, but more than one virtual switch. This allows us to isolate the packet, so if a logical partition is connected to one switch, there is absolutely no way it can see packets flying about that's on the other switch. We've also got virtual LAN support in here, so we can see we have one VLAN. This is the one that I created straight away for my virtual I/O server, and we can also switch to partition view, but we don't have any partitions, so that's not so interesting. If we go back to the VLAN view and I select it, it gives me some more information in here. So it is in my VIOS server, it's known as ENT2, and I've got an option here to create AC, a shared Ethernet adapter on top of that, and connect that to my virtual Ethernet. Okay, so yes, that's exactly what I want to do. I won't configure virtual Ethernet failover. I've only got one VIO server on this machine, but if I wanted to, I would just click this button here, select which of the other virtual I/O servers is involved and which physical adapter, and that would be it. It would actually set up the dual VIO server with network failover. In this case, it's a simple one, so I'll just click OK. As you can see at the top here, we can do things with creating a virtual switch and modifying it. Again, we're not going to show that here, but you can see the options. Now let's go back, and this time we'll pick up the Virtual Storage Manager. You can see there it's querying the virtual I/O server to find out the details of what's going on there. If you're familiar with IVM, the Integrated Virtualization Manager, that's the alternative to the HMC for the smaller machines. That is the Blaze, the 520 and the 550, and also the 560. So when I say that's the smaller end of the range, that's up to 16 CPUs, of course. And these panels look very similar to the way IVM lets you manage your virtual I/O server. We can see here virtual disks. That will get more interesting as we go on. I want to go into the storage pools. That allows me to use a couple of disks to create a volume group. It's called a storage pool, in which I can then place logical volumes which are supporting my virtual clients. So let's go down here to create a storage pool. I'll give it a name. I use VG at the end out of habit. And I'll select 2 disks. Now this machine was used in the past for something else, and we'll get a warning here that it says that this disk looks like it's got something on it. Well, we don't care about what was on the disk beforehand, so I'll do a force operation to create that volume group, or storage pool as we refer to it in the VIO server. It's made changes here, so it's querying the virtual I/O server again. Okay, so here's my new storage pool. If I go back to my virtual disks, and I wanted to create a virtual disk, now I've got the option of selecting various storage pools. It's best if you can to avoid using the root VG for your client logical partitions. That makes backing up simpler. I know on small machines that may not be possible. But we can, for example, create a new virtual disk. Let's just call it something simple, and we'll give it a size. Megabytes is a little small. Let's go for some gigabytes. And we won't assign it to a logical partition because we don't have any clients yet. There we go. It's that easy. That's easier than logging on to the VIOS server. And if you're like me, I get a bit rusty with those commands, and so I have to go and remember the options and things to go and create virtual disks for my clients. If we go along to our physical volumes here, we can see the actual disks inside the machine and what they've been allocated to. Again, if we select a particular disk, we can go into select actions and see the various things we can actually do. Take it in and out of a storage pool, change this assignment and things. If we look along at optical devices, we can see in here that I have a SATA DVD ROM drive in my machine, and if I select it, I can then hit modify to actually allocate it to a particular logical partition. We won't do it at the moment, we need some clients to really make sense of that. We can also create a media library in here. We'll show you that later on. Now if I clicked on here the virtual fiber channel, we get a warning here that I don't have any N-port ID virtualization capable cards in my machine, which is true. I don't have the 8 gigabit adapters, fiber channel adapters. Now I'll close this and then we'll go and create a logical partition. Okay, then let's take options to create a new logical partition, AIX. I'll do this fairly quickly and keep the comments to a minimum. Just highlight the places where it's different. I like to keep the logical partition and the host name the same. Saves a lot of confusion. We used to have more profiles when we couldn't dynamically change them. These days we just use normal. Maybe we make one or two more if we added resources to it. Shared processes should be the normal these days. Let's boost these numbers a little bit. Uncapped, so we can use up spare resources. Give it 2 gigabytes of memory. We've got 16 on this little box, so it should be plenty. Let's give it some headroom and we'll take the megabytes down to 0. We're going to go pure virtual, so we don't need any adapters. We have the regular 2 serial adapters, and we're going to add Ethernet on ID2, VLAN 1, that's what we got on the VIO server, so that will match quite nicely. We click on view here, we'll see what is available. So VLAN 1 is going out via a VIO server. Perfect. Now we'll create our virtual SCSI disk. Now we'll create our virtual SCSI adapter, to which we can add our disk space. Virtual adapter 3 that we predicted on the VIO server, and that's going to connect to the VIO server, but we need to connect it to the right adapter on the VIO server. And here we see the slot 12 is connected, and it's going to connect to any client. It says here slot 3, which is what we're connecting at the moment, so this is good. That matches up to the one we prepared earlier. I think it's always worth a while on a VIO server to keep a good half a dozen to a dozen adapters ready to go. They don't cost much in memory. We're talking about a few kilobytes. Okay, so we're already there. We can then move on. I'm not going to use the HEA. We can leave those as the default. And the final summary here that we could check against our worksheet that we prepared earlier. And then we go, we have our new logical partition ready. But let's go and allocate some disk space for it now. Configuration, virtual resources, virtual storage management. So let's create a virtual disk. give it a name. Around here we tend to use LP2, the logical partition 2, logical volume 1 as the first one. So we decided that client VG looks like a good target. Let's give this 16 gigabytes and we'll assign it to our new logical partition. Okay, then we have our logical partition ready to go. Now we could start that up, but we haven't got an operating system on our disk. Now we could use NIM as a favourite way of doing that, or we could use the DVD in our machine, put a copy of the operating system boot media in there and boot off that, or we could use our virtual optical library. So let's try that. Optical devices. If we were going to use the physical drive, we can click this and assign it to our new logical partition, but let's do create a library. We have to decide how big our library is. This is going to be a file system, and let's think nice and big. We've got a couple of 300 gig drives, so let's make it 200 gigabytes. So we created our media library. It's 200 gigabytes in size, and it's all free. If we hit select action here, we can see we can add media to it. We can then assign that to a particular partition, and we can delete it if we're finished with it. So we'll take add media here to see the various ways we can add our ISO images to our library. If we have a file on the VIOS server, we can ask it to pull that into the library. We can import it from the physical optical device, so we put the DVD into the DVD drive and read the file off that, or we can create what's known as a blank media file. This is if we're going to use a read-write DVD virtual optical device, so we can actually do backups into that. So I'm going to create one called AIX 6.1 TL3, and I've already mounted via NFS onto my VIOS server a repository where I keep all my master ISO images. I'll just cut and paste that in here. You can see it's this NFS mount point, and I'll click OK. That will take a little bit of time. It's a 4 gigabyte or so ISO image. Okay, I cut 10 seconds out of the movie. After 15 seconds or so, it had created our media in here, so we can click on that particular media, and then we can assign that to a particular logical partition. Well, we only have one in this case, so it's obvious what to do. Let's read only, and we want to make it available to bronze 2, and we'll OK that. Let's quickly activate a logical partition. We'll open a console. It should just start straight off the new CD device. Zero for this console. We can see the propeller running there, so it's loading something. Yes, this is the console, so 1. And yes, I'll have English. And we're into installing. I won't make you sit there and wait for the 20 minutes or so as we do that. Okay then, while you weren't looking, I created another logical partition up here, and we'll just configure that one in using a few of the different options. Configure virtual resources. Network will just pick up and go as long as you use the right VLAN ID to go out on the virtual I/O server. So look into storage. Okay, in this case, well, let's pick up a whole physical volume and give it to that particular logical partition. Now these could be LUNs or they could be a SCSI disk. And in my case, I got simple 300 gig SCSI disk. So the first three here in use, HDisk 3. Let's modify assignment. So what do I want to connect it to? If we look in here, here's my logical partition 2, but it's looked on my VIO server and it knows that slot 13 is currently assigned to any other logical partition. Now I can go to the VIO server setup and set this to be explicitly bronze logical partition 3, and that would be a good piece of housekeeping to make it more obvious and make it sure that nobody accidentally doesn't use my disk. But in this case we can just pick it up anyway. Okay, as you can see here now, this disk is assigned to a particular logical partition, whatever is connected to slot 13 on this VIO server here. Now if I wanted dual VIO server connections to the same LUN, again it would appear as a HDisk in here. Of course its physical location ID would give me a clue that this of the worldwide port name, and I'd click on here and change to the other VIO server and then make sure my client is attached again to the same LUN. Can't do that on my simple machine here. Let's actually go to the optical devices. Here's my optical device, so I'll select it. I guess you could have more than one in larger machines. And we'll do modify assignment. And again I'll connect it to the same vhost on my virtual I/O server. And we can see the name here. If we do a dynamic change on a VIO server to set it to bronze LPAR 3 and slot 3, then we'll actually come up with the name and the slot number that it's really connected to. Well, that's the end of our movie. I hope you found it interesting. It means that this will stop you having to log into the VIO server to run some of the simple commands and do the basic setups. You may still need to do that if you've got to do something particularly complicated. But keeping users off the VIO server will actually increase the reliability of the VIO server that also has quite a reputation for being very reliable already. Of course, if you're using DirectX 6 or you're one of these script junkies that run remote commands into the VIO server, maybe it's not so interesting for you, but you still may find it useful to be able to go to the HMC to have a quick look at the current setup rather than going into the commands and trying to remember the specifics of the commands to get the information you want.